Hi, I'm Jacqueline, and today we're going to be talking about a fabric painting technique, which I call dry rub painting. You're using regular acrylics, and it's actually very similar to stenciling if you've ever done any kind of stenciling. So this is a project that I did using that technique, and what I did was I just painted very lightly, which I'll be showing you how to do today, and then I outlined in black embroidery thread, and I think it came out really, really cute. So to do this, what you're going to need your fabric, a piece of white or light colored fabric, and here I have already traced my design onto the fabric, and I've used a Pigma Micron. Now, since we are using acrylic paint, which is water-based, I don't suggest using something that's water-soluble. Use something permanent when you're tracing your design on so that your paint doesn't make your pen marks bleed. Then we're going to be using, as I said, just regular acrylic paints from the craft store. These are very inexpensive. You can get lots and lots of colors. I've got some paper towels. I've got a plate. This is a styrofoam plate. You want a plate that has some sort of a finish on it, not just a regular paper plate, because you'll find that your paint just seeps into it. So an old ceramic plate, a plastic plate, styrofoam works really great. We've got freezer paper, and the brushes that we'll be using are stencil brushes, and they're very stiff. They have a nice stiff bristle to them. So that's the kind of brush that you want to use. And I think I got these at the craft store for $5 for a package of 4 or 5. So again, these are pretty inexpensive. And I've got some paper towels here. So to get started, I'm just going to put a tiny bit of paint. Now this uses a really tiny bit of paint. You don't need much paint at all to do this technique. So I'm just going to put just tiny dots of paint out on my palette. Okay, and then what I want to do, actually what I should have done first was just take my freezer paper and I'm going to iron it to the back of my traced design. The reason we do that is a couple of reasons. It gives a little more body to the paper, and it also prevents your paint from seeping through to the back. Okay, so just give that a quick press. Okay, so now I've got my freezer paper on the back. The next thing I'm going to do is grab a brush. Now you want to use a brush that's appropriate to the size of your design. So if you're doing a little like tiny flower center, obviously you wouldn't want to use the giant brush. So I'm going to start with, I think I will work on the flower center. So I've got this teeny tiny brush, and I'm going to go to my palette and get the tiniest bit of paint, because you can always add more paint. I've got the tiniest bit of paint, and I'm going to kind of rub a lot of the excess off. So if you've ever done stenciling, you're familiar with this technique where you rub a lot of that excess off. And then I want to go over to my design and just start building the color. Now you can see there's just a tiny bit of color there. And you can just keep building the color until you get what you want. Okay. Now I forgot to bring a glass of water over to rinse my brushes, but that's okay. I'm just gonna, for now, I'll just clean them on my paper towel. So now I think I will work on his little nose. And I think I want to make that this kind of charcoal color. So I've got a slightly bigger brush. Okay, and I'm going to get a tiny bit of paint, and I'm going to work it into the brush. Now the other thing about if you've done stenciling, you know you want to concentrate your color on the edges. So it gives you kind of a shaded effect if you do it that way. So I'm going to start on the outer edges of this. And now, unlike stenciling, I don't have any kind of a physical border there to keep my paint from seeping over into the next area. So you do have to be kind of careful not to go outside the lines too much. But remember, we're going to put embroidery over these edges, so that's going to cover up a lot of little mistakes. So I'm just going to keep adding some paint, and again, I'm concentrating it around the edges. And you see how it gets like that nice shaded effect? And if that's not dark enough, you just keep going until you get it the way you want it. Now, one thing about these bristle brushes is they do make kind of like little crumbs on your fabric because the bristles actually kind of break off as you're scrubbing into the fabric. So I just blow that off. Okay, and now while I've got the gray on here, another great thing about this technique is it's great for animals because you can do a lot of blending. So I can get some more of this gray. And let's just say I want to shade, or I want to make just part of her face dark, but not the whole thing. Because if you know about, the French bulldogs, they tend to have like spots and things on their faces. So let's give her some traditional French bulldog markings. And I'm going to I want to leave this part white. So what I'm going to do is just kind of start feathering and blending out so I get a nice blended look there. I don't want harsh lines here. I want to kind of blend it. And I think I'll come back in here and make this part a little bit darker. And you just would keep working from darkest to lightest area. Okay. Now for the eye, I could go in with some blue or some black paint, or when it's time to do my embroidery, I could just fill that in with a satin stitch. Now I think I'll put a little pink in her ear. So I'm going to go back and get my pink brush again. And again, this is a great way, the little pink in the ear, you probably don't want hard lines. You want it to be kind of soft. So I'm just going to kind of make the edge there. And then I'm going to blend it towards the center so that the center part is a little bit lighter and the edges are a little darker. So you can see this is really subtle. In my sample, I kept the colors very light. You can make it as heavy as you want. Just keep adding. Remember, the paint is very inexpensive. This little piece of fabric is very inexpensive. So just play and have fun. If you're not happy with the way it comes out, no big deal. Just go grab another piece of fabric and a couple more dots of paint and try it again. So I'm going to do the other ear the same way. And I got kind of a blob there, so I can try to scrub that out a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't come out all the way. You can see it's kind of going to stay dark there, so you have a couple of options. You can just leave it because it's a handmade item, and nothing handmade is absolutely perfect. The other thing you can do is just go in with a little more paint and try to darken up the area around it so that it matches and blends in a little more. And that ear is a little bit darker than this one, so I'm going to go back and kind of even those up. So that's really it. That's how you do that dry rub technique. And it looks a little plain right now, but once you add the embroidery stitches, it really makes the design pop. It really adds a lot of detail to it. I love the way this looks. I've used all black. You could use different colors if you want. I could add some little, I've added some little French knots here. I've made her nose pink there, and I did do a satin stitch on her eye. I think I had originally painted her eyes blue and then decided that I really just wanted the satin stitch there. So, and you can also just add in the little details, like I added a little running stitch around the collar to give a little more detail. So that's it. That's how you do the dry rub technique for fabric painting.